so different. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of We Are Not So Different. I really appreciate you guys showing up each and every time. So today's guest is Miss Dr. Tara Egan. I want to give y'all a little bit of background about her. For all the people they wonder, so that y'all know that she has pedigree. So she's not just talking off the side of her neck. She's coming with experience and knowledge and all the stuff to boot. So Dr. Tara Egan is a parent coach, an author, a public speaker, and a podcast host with over 20 years experience in the mental health field. She's worked as a school psychologist, a parent coach, licensed child and adolescent therapist, author, adjunct professor, public speaker, and podcast. So she's a mother to two and a stepmother to four. She holds a doctorate in school psychology and has specialized training in counseling and family school relations. And she established Charlotte Parent Coaching LLC in 2011. Just a tidbit for all my people, because sometimes my guests want to know, well, how does she know? And how does he know? Well, now you guys know. Dr. Tara Egan's, good morning.
Good morning. That's a fantastic introduction. I appreciate all the resume that you shared.
You're welcome. Yes, you have to. And I have no problem with people like not having pedigree, because sometimes, your experience is earned in the trenches with the actual experience as opposed to book knowledge. But the fact that you have both, boom. So that little piece is for my technical babies that like to know, the backstory.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, y'all know the drill. Find your favorite spot on the couch. Get your favorite drink, whether that is Kool-Aid or Cavassier. Exhale and get ready to tune into this conversation. And y'all know how I feel about taking notes. I hope you got your pen and the paper, because we got a doctor in the building. Get your pen and your paper so y'all can write notes, because I'm sure she's going to be dropping nuggets. And so y'all didn't see this before, but before, when we were introducing each other backstage, she pulled out her pen and her pad. I was like, yes, Miss E, yes, doctor, because I love. I have to take notes. Sometimes I don't trust this to remember it, but y'all don't know. I keep a pen and paper near me. So when she pulled out hers, I was like, yes, I just know this is going to be a good conversation. So hope y'all got y'all pen and papers ready for Miss Dr. Egan. And as usual, if you have questions, comments, concerns, at the end, we'll make sure to get all of her information. So if you want to reach her or hit me in my DMs, however, if you have questions or comments or concerns afterwards, all that good stuff. But now that y'all settled in, let's jump in. Miss, I feel like I don't want to disrespect the title, but I also want to make
Tara.
Okay, cool.
Tara. Everybody does.
I feel like I want to give you, because I'm sure you worked for that doctor.
The doctorate thing I feel can be a bit of a barrier. Okay. And there's times when it's good to whip it out when I'm talking to judges or lawyers, sometimes medical doctors. It's pretty handy. But when I'm working with my clients, the parents I work with, when I'm doing public speaking events, I don't need the doctor.
Awesome. I appreciate you for knocking down that wall. I appreciate you, Miss Tara. So my guests get the same two questions every single time. So I'm going to give them to you. Number one, if you had the undivided attention of an audience of your choosing, who would that said audience be, and what would you tell them?
So for sure, I would communicate with mothers who have gone through a divorce or separation. Okay. I have experienced my own divorce I would classify it as pretty high conflict and sort of been through the ringer. But now as a therapist and as a parent coach, a lot of the work I do is with families who are going through separation and divorce. And even though I work with moms and dads, I work with the children. I really feel like reaching the mothers is where we can see a lot of support happen for kids. And because I just feel like in most homes, not all of them, the mother is who is setting the emotional tone.
Mhm.
And if that mother is taking care of herself, she's healthy, she's recognizing, and honoring sort of like her grief in the process and the hard work that she's doing to keep her children as resilient as possible. Like, I feel like that just really needs to be recognized. And I feel like women benefit so much from getting support. So, like, those are my people for sure.
Yes. Yes. I love that. So, um, the women who are newly divorced and or separated, and okay, I say this all the time, but I feel like I need to say it again. Andrea loves all the babies, men and women. I
Mhm.
just I feel as though I might be a little biased because I am a woman, but me and y'all my babies too. I don't want you to feel like we're like tuning you out. So take all of this in, whether you're a man or a woman, take it all in because it's all love. So you would gravitate towards the women who are in that special place. What would you tell them?
Well, I think some of it is having them really take the time and the effort and the energy and the finances, like the cost, like the investment in caring for themselves during this process, because
I like
without
that.
them really staying in as healthy of a place as possible, like the ship can sink. And so I
Hmm.
think there's times where women, mothers in particular, can be very self-sacrificing. And we can look at, like, if we attend to our own needs, or if we recognize our own pain and, like, honor it, like that's somehow weak, or that means that we're ignoring or dismissing the needs of our children. And a lot of women who, even if they had big segments of their marriage that was positive and healthy,
Uh,
usually by the time a marriage ends, there's some unhealthy patterns and dynamics that have taken place. And it's really important that women don't stay in that place, where they're continuing with patterns that aren't healthy, or they're maintaining relationships with toxic people, or they're not doing what they need to get on even ground, whether it's financial, whether it's establishing relationships with extended family, whether it's setting boundaries with an ex. I
Boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's so important.
Oops.
And you mentioned kind of the call out to the dads, and I completely agree, because I think that sometimes when I support the mothers, that really trickles down and benefits the dads too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes that is an effective way to support the dads, is by having the relationship with their ex-wife or ex-partner be less conflictual.
I love one key word that you said, the investment of
Mhm.
self care as it pertains to the women. And I'm not leaving out the men too, men and or women. The investment in self care, period.
Mhm.
I don't know if people view that as an investment. That's why I said I like the wording that you chose, because if mama and or daddy is responsible for the house and they're responsible for the children and they've got a job and maybe they're a daughter and maybe they're a auntie or a uncle or and they've got other stuff that they're responsible for too, extracurricular activities, all life, right?
Yeah.
And you're right, we have the tendency to be so self-sacrificial, but the fact of the matter is, if you are not right, nothing else around you can be right. You can't take care of anyone if you yourself are depleted, right? So the investment, I love the word that you choose, the investment of self-care. Oh, get the
It's
pedicure,
hard.
get the hair done, get the petty mani or whatever. It is hard, but then you think about it, it's really about treating yourself, doing find some things that you like for you, like
Well, and I agree. And I think, though, sometimes that term of self-care is misused, in that we think of it as a moment in time where we're engaging in like a luxury, right? Like we're like getting our nails done or something. But sometimes self-care is like just getting shit done. It's taking the afternoon off to get your taxes done.
okay.
It's getting a babysitter so you can do your holiday shopping. It's saying, okay, well, instead of this obligation of going and doing something like a volunteer obligation, let's say at church, which you might really value, like maybe you just stay home and clean your house and sit down at the end of the night and just feel like you got everything together. Like
Okay.
a lot of times it's affording yourself the opportunity to make parts of your world right or to reduce your stress. Like I always give this example, like taxes for me is very stressful, not because I have any, undue debt or anything like that, but like there's such a drag and it's just like the most boring task ever. And it can loom and loom. And now the date is getting closer and like everything else feels more important. And like I've just learned, like I need to honor the time I need to do the taxes because the anxiety that I live in until
Not
those are
worth
done
it.
is, yeah, it's so stressful. And so for women, I think sometimes I feel like we like glorify being busy and stressed and like overwrought, and we don't feel like we're doing enough until we're at the point where we want to break. And in reality, I think we have to get out of that mindset of like that we need to be a wreck to be doing all we can do. And so to me, self care might mean, doing that, getting that haircut or getting a workout in or eating something yummy. But for other people, it might be, oh my gosh, finally the laundry's done. And I know all week long I'm going to have fresh underwear to grab in the drawer in the morning. And that feels good.
I like that. I like that very, and thank you for the clarification. Um, and I don't know what it is, but it's true. Like, why do we have to be busy, busy, busy all the time? And I think you said that sometimes we'll glorify that, like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I'm so busy. Oh my gosh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Why? Why do we do that? If someone has the answer to that question, please give it to me. I very much value your opinion. I very much like to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number two. If you have the opportunity to speak to a younger version of yourself, let's say 4 or 5 year old little Tara, what do you think she would need to hear?
Hmm. I once worked with a therapist who told me that one of the reasons why I am lucky enough to be generally well adjusted is because I had strong attachment figures in my youth. So from birth till, as I developed into that 5, 6, 7 year old, I had caregivers who were consistent and loving and responsive to my needs. And it was around that time, the older I got, the more mentally ill my mother became.
Mhm.
And I've always kind of marveled at the amount of resilience I've had, considering how, she was just very, very ill. And when that therapist shared that with me, of like, hey, because I was like, how am I not like crippled with anxiety or depression or horrible self esteem or something? And she was like, because you had appropriate attachment figures. And so if I could go back to that like young girl, like I wish somebody had told me that before I was 24 and told me like you're going to be okay. Because as things got more difficult, as my mother struggled more and more with mental illness, like it kind of felt like things weren't going to be okay. But they were, I mean, it was tough
Yeah.
and it's not a big, hard secret to figure out why I went into the mental health field and work with parents and kids. There's kind of a pretty direct correlation between what I experienced and, the type of work I do now. But I think that it would have been so empowering to hear, like, you're strong, you got this, like, even when it's tough, like, this is gonna, I call it defaulting to happy. Like,
Default
I
into.
feel like I like, am that toy in the pool that if it gets tipped over, it bounces back up right side.
Okay.
And that is not because I'm some amazing person. That is probably very linked to genetics in that attachment figure. But man, would it have been comforting to know that?
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, doctor. Okay. So this month has all been about relationships. Like, and I'm doing everything from marriage, pre-marriage, divorce, aftermath, all that good stuff. So I wanted to sneak in a professional in there, a doctor, so who could give me some tips. But before I jump into that, I am intrigued with the podcast. And maybe it's because I'm a podcaster, but the one that you have called One Day You'll Thank Me.
Yes.
Tell us more, please.
So, right. So as you mentioned, I'm a therapist and I'm the parent of two biological children and I have four stepchildren and I'm married to my second husband and we've been married almost 6 years. And when COVID started and the kids went fully virtual, and I'm now going from seeing kids every day and being in schools in my office to trying to do therapy all online, I started to think about, how can I expand resources as much as possible? And I kept talking about a podcast. And I said to my daughter, if you did this with me, like I would be more into it. She's like, I'm game. So we
Yes. So
released
what's
our
daughter's
first
name? What's her name?
so her name's Anna.
All
Anna
right.
is my daughter.
All
And
right,
so
Anna.
yeah, and she just turned 16. And so we have been doing the podcast for 3 seasons. We're like on the tail end of our third season, and each season is like between 20 and 22 episodes. And she's fantastic. And when you talk about relationships, I mean, I like to think that our close relationship translates, in our podcast, that like people can hear that we're connected and we're close, and but we still honor each other as like separate people who have separate viewpoints. But I've been so privileged to have her be front row to all these experts we've interviewed over the last year. Like she has gotten to pick the brain of experts on eating disorders and sex addiction and anxiety and depression and relationship abuse and all sorts of things. And she gets to learn all this, and I don't have to be the one to say it because kids don't always want to listen to the parents.
No.
So she's sitting in an interview and she hears somebody talking about some really important topic for an hour, and she tunes in and she's taking notes and she's helping to prepare the episode, and it's pretty adorable.
How cool is that, first of all, that you get to share that kind of experience with your daughter? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so cool. I think it's so 2021.
Yeah.
Like it's so current, it's so fresh. But then, like you said, like she gets the opportunities to meet all these new people and pick their minds and hear various perceptions on different topics. I'm sure it's like
Yeah.
it's totally
Yeah.
like expanded her horizons in so many ways, shapes, and forms. She's probably, I can just see her being leaps and bounds ahead of her peers because of the types of experiences that she's. I think it's so cool. But it's called One Day You'll Thank Me.
Mm-hmm.
And we will like I said, I promise y'all we'll get all her information at the end. We won't let Dr. Tegan or you run up out of here without
Yeah.
leaving her information.
Well, I
So
appreciate that. Yeah, we release new episodes every Wednesday, and some episodes are solo episodes where it's just Anna and I talking about. It's usually some sort of psychological topic like gaslighting or imaginary audience or natural versus logical consequences. Usually something related to parenting and behavior and overall well-being, and it could be in relation to teenage years or even younger kids.
mm,
But the other at least 50% of our episodes are with an expert, and so they're licensed in something, and they're there to talk about some really specific informational topic for parents to just kind of enrich their knowledge base when it comes to figuring out how to get through those child rearing years. So I love it. It's a great like kind of intellectual exercise to talk to all these people. And I really encourage parents, tune in, and you can go through the list and pick the episodes that feel relevant to your family, or you can start at episode 1 and just say, all right, I'm just going to kind of get hopefully a well-rounded body of information that could be handy at any point in my kids' lives.
wow. I think that's so cool for adults and children, by the way. So you get to also draw that younger audience in because your daughter has that, younger, fresh perspective that's not necessarily marred by the
Yeah.
experiences of life, if I can say that.
Yeah. Well, and she offers, like there's just some things that kids in this teens, in our world now have been exposed to that I wasn't exposed to when I was 13, 14, or 15. And so, she shares some of that. And we talk a lot about the role of technology and social media because that's such a huge component of kids' lives. So she can offer some perspective. We have an upcoming episode about like kind of the ins and outs of Snapchat and like what to know if you're a parent and you're trying to decide whether or not your child is mature enough to handle Snapchat. Like what are some characteristics that as a parent you want to be aware of? So it's like a chock
That's
full of
real.
information, but a lot of that information I know because my kid is of the age where she uses Snapchat and it's a big part of her social world.
Listen, I am a fully grown adult, and sometimes I think my peers ain't ready for Snapchat. Like
I
somebody
know
should, somebody should have had that conversation with them.
a lot of mistakes get made on Snapchat.
Yes, but I'm gonna leave that alone. So, parenting, co-parenting through divorce and separation. So since we're talking about relationships this month, I know you yourself said you've been through a divorce, and you have been married for 6 years to your new hubby, and that you have biological children and stepchildren. So for those of y'all paying attention and taking notes, not only does she have the pedigree with her doctorate's degree, but she's living. I can't even say she has the experience. She's living it right now. So, was it, and if you said this already, I'm sorry, was it, can I say, I don't want to say happy, but you can have like,
Oh yeah.
cordial like separations and or divorces. So because there were children involved, was that something that you experienced?
So
Was that
we
Go ahead.
still struggle to this day to co-parent effectively. So it's been 10 years since, I separated from my first husband at the end of 2010. And, we still struggle to have really productive conversations. If you asked him, he'd probably say it's me and I'm the problem. From my perspective, I feel like, there could probably be more effort on his part, but it's been really a challenge and to think about, how to parent these kids where there's times when not only do I not have a co-parent in my co-parent, but I actually feel like sometimes there's like the sabotaging of the process, like everything is harder. And I don't always feel that way. It's just more flashes of things. But sometimes I'm like, man, this would be easier if I could just do this myself and not
Right.
have to consult another person who really doesn't respect me. And and now I have my second husband who is very much a co-parent and is super supportive and has a great relationship with my kids and really gives them a different experience of fatherhood
That's
and
awesome.
what a man looks like or how a man defines himself. So I feel blessed that he's able to enrich their world in that way. Not to discount the value of their dad or anything, but
Sure, I understand.
there's times when you get to mindfully choose at a later time who your partner is going to be, you can end up really having a lot of choice in who your child is going to or children are going to be exposed to.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge though. My oldest is 16, my son is 14. Like I don't anticipate that things are suddenly going to get better when my kids become legal adults. We're going to have things like college educations and weddings and potentially grandchildren and things like that. And so I think it's something that I have to really think big picture and long haul about and not get caught up in the details because it can really be demoralizing.
I can only imagine. But so this is something that once again you have experienced. So when you get to talk about things like this, it's not just something that you're speaking from that you learned in a book, right?
Right.
So do you find yourself utilizing the same tips and or practices that you coach other parents through yourself with your present ex-husband?
Hmm. Well, it's I personally get a lot of comfort from obtaining knowledge. Like I'm a person when I'm confronted with something difficult, I'm like, what's the research on this? Who are the leaders in the field as far as how to address this? So I think that's, obviously led me down the path of being not only like real life experience, but book smart about it because I'm aware of what the current research is and who the leaders are in the field of co parenting research and managing divorce and fostering resilience in kids. So there's definitely times I have to step back and say, what would I tell my client? If I were my client, what would I say? And make sure that what I'm doing matches up with the type of recommendations I would give. Because I really shouldn't be giving recommendations if I'm not willing to follow them or find them too hard to follow.
Right.
And and I think that for me, I find it very empowering and it keeps me on the straight and narrow. And I think I have a lot of really supportive people in my life, whether it's fellow therapists, my husband, my close friends, to really who aren't just yes people. They don't just say, "Oh, hon, you're right on the mark all the time." Like they're willing to say, "I don't know, are you able to look at this objectively, or have you ever considered that maybe it's this way or that way?" And I find that really helpful. I find that is a really important part. And I think one of the major, I don't know, kind of threats to our survival when we're going through divorce is surrounding ourselves with the wrong people. Because
Oh,
there's people who can really flame the fire, they can egg on the drama, they can almost like get their jollies, right? From, it's exciting and stimulating to see the next or hear about the next story, or now what did he do
right.
now, or what are you going to do, or let's look at their social media, or did you hear that they're dating this person, or they spent their money on that, or did you hear what daughter or son said? And like there's people who really can keep you in a space like that, and there's people who can do a lot of shaming behavior too. Well, uh how is this your fault, or you should have been a better wife, or this is against the Bible, or your kids are definitely going to be messed up over the fact their parents are divorced. I mean,
Oh
there's a
my
lot of
gosh.
shaming that happens um in a divorce. And like you got to be open to feedback, but it should be feedback. It shouldn't be shaming, it shouldn't be criticism. It should be somebody who is speaking to you of a place of love and information, and then separating out from the people who are just there for the
The
show.
show. Right. Like, so I've heard that before, how people like, oh, your kids will be messed up because of the divorce and blah, 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 blah. And sometimes I just want to, in the most disrespectful manner, say, just shut up.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
first, you have no idea. You can't, unless you're a prophet, you don't have the ability to foresee my future. Or, well, not mine, because I don't have kids or whatever, but like listening in on
Yeah.
conversations such as that. Because how about you talking about kids that'll be messed up because of divorce? How about sometimes kids are messed up because there isn't a divorce, because there are years or decades of abuse and all other kind of stuff running rampant in the home? How about that? So when I hear stuff like that, people making broad like generalizations, it really just gets right up under my skin.
Well, and some people say those things from a place of fear, like they want your life to be filled with drama and pain because, my circumstance isn't like that. So if you're over there in crazy town and I'm here with relative stability, then I'm going to be protected from divorce, or my kids are going to be protected from experiencing some of that chaos. And there's a lot of times where people struggle the most is when they see that divorced couple and then they recognize, "Ooh, I see some of those things in my marriage, or my husband's kind of like that, or my wife." And it doesn't mean they're ready for a divorce. It doesn't mean that anything, a statement should be made. But it's really scary for people when they're like, "Oh, so your husband left you when you turned 40 and he got a new job and his dad died? Well, my dad just died and I'm 40 and my husband's thinking about a career change." And like none of those things are correlate with divorce necessarily,
Right.
but there's some similarities in your life and my life. And that's really scary for me to hear. And so I think that, I think too is just to go back to your comment about, telling people to just shut up when they're making these statements about what potential outcome. And then you mentioned, what about the kids who experience, years of conflict or domestic violence? And I'm in the process of preparing this like talk that I'm doing. So I'm like knee deep in the research right now. But one of the things that's coming out pretty clearly in research is that when kids are exposed to consistent conflict when their parents are married or living in the same house, and there's a lot of interparental conflict, and where there's some indication that like kids aren't completely shocked, right, when their parents decide to get divorced, a lot of
Right.
times those kids have a quicker adjustment because it makes sense to them. There's an element of relief sometimes, or it just makes sense. Like mom and dad always argue and they don't really like each other and they don't want to go on vacation together, or they're not generous to each other. And so for those kids, they saw, whether or not it was conscious, they saw some writing on the wall. Whereas kids who see their parents in the in the light where they're not arguing, they're never sharing conflict, parents are putting on this big show, and the kids don't have a lot of awareness of stress or conflict, and then the parents decide to split up, those kids experience a lot more stress because it doesn't
Wow.
make sense to them. Like mom and dad didn't argue, they slept in the same room. Like, we did Thanksgiving dinner and everybody blew out candles on my birthday. Like, to them, it feels like their world is upside down.
Wow.
So I'm not saying that parents should show kids horrible conflict, but the reality is kids have an idea when things are going terribly, and there can be an element of relief when mom and dad can come home at the end of a workday and not be screaming at their spouse, even if it means that you're struggling more financially, or there isn't as many people around to pick up the kids from an extracurricular activity or whatever. Like most kids would rather have less conflict and like stability and low drama than have mom and dad live in the same house and have more money.
Hmm. I never really considered like how you talked about the children who are in the household with the constant conflict as opposed to the ones who aren't. So I grew up in a very abusive household. And yeah, when my parents split, there was no surprise. There were elements of relief. But I never took the time to think about the flip side of the coin, like for the ones who are in the, can I say, relationship that just seems so Facebook
Mhm.
perfect,
Or
or
even
picture
if it's
perfect.
just calm, there might be people who are kind of coexisting. Maybe they sleep in the same room, maybe they don't. Maybe they just kind of live separate lives, or they never make eye contact, or they don't go to each other for comfort, and it's just kind of cold or blank.
Okay.
For a lot of times for kids, like they don't notice. Like that, what they know is that when they go and snuggle up with mom, she hugs them back, and they know that dad always picks them up from baseball, and they know that there's Christmas gifts under the tree, and on Sunday we go to grandma's house for a picnic, and generally mom and dad speak like respectfully to each other if they do speak. And like it's not until they're older that they can be like, gosh, I never saw my parents touch each other. I never heard my dad give my mom a compliment. I never saw my mom um, praise him to outside people. What they think is like, I'm just a little kid and my needs are being met. And so
Right.
now all of a sudden we're in a divorce situation, and it feels scary, and the routine is changing and finances can look different. But a kid who wants to have somebody pay attention and help them with math homework, and they come home and mom and dad are screaming, and dad drove off with a suitcase and he's telling her to F off, and mom's calling up grandma and saying he left again or he's drinking or whatever it is, like they just wanted to do their math homework.
That's it. So I guess then, if I can ask, without giving away any of your trade secrets, of course, um, what does that parent, that mother or that father, do when the relationship, after, we're talking about aftermath, after the divorce and or separation, but there are kids in the mix, and I don't have this situation where there are kids or whatever, but I can only imagine where if I have kids and then my ex, like they're part of that. Like there are certain things I cannot do without my ex, right?
Yeah.
So if I can't get it together, if the two divorced or separated parents can't get it together, can't seem to resolve conflict, can't have a conversation without there being constant like friction, but there's certain things that are needed in order to move forward with the progression of the kids. Like, how do you do that? How do you move forward? How do you make sure that the kids get what they need as it pertains to stuff where the two parents must
Yeah.
interact? How do you get that train
Moving in
chugging
the right
down
direction.
the
Yeah.
tracks?
Well, there's a couple things is, um, you know, always have, like, there's a couple choices here. So parents can co-parent effectively where they have decent communication. They really honor the other parent's relationship with the kids and kind of the routine and the rhythm that happens in that other parent's household. And there is, civility when they're together and there's decent collaboration and they really are working together to make decisions. That's ideal, right? If we can
Yes.
have that. It doesn't mean there's not conflict. It just means that conflict is not going to get in the way of those kids having relationships with their parents and parents getting stuff done. Okay. The second choice that parents can make is to do what's called parallel parenting. And what that is parents really stay in their own lane, in their own house. And so they might create rules in their house that work for their house and they focus less energy on what's happening at the other parent. They may, I mean, in extreme versions, they may make a choice to not go to the same extracurricular events. They might say, you go to all the soccer games on odd days and I'll go to all the ones on even days. Or they kind of have like a truce where, you stay on that side of the gym when we're watching the basketball game and I'll stay over here. And there's kind of just some things that they do to avoid interaction and keep the conflict low. They might only communicate via email instead of getting into a heated argument in person or on the phone. Like there's some protections they put in place. There's even some programming. There's a program called Our Family Wizard where it's an app on your phone and parents go in and they can upload receipts. There's a calendar, there's journals, there's all sorts of stuff that you can do to communicate with your ex. And then for me as a clinician or a lawyer potentially can go in and see all of the communication. And they even have a function of the program where if they detect an email is written too aggressively, it will give the writer of the email feedback that this may be an email that is not like delicately worded, and they can make different suggestions of how to say that same idea in maybe a little less confrontational way. So for,
Wow.
right. So for some parents, I really teach them how to use those resources and how to, they might have different paths. They might be on different paths as far as not doing a lot of overlap, but they are showing high quality parenting skills. Because what we do know from the research is even if there's conflict between parents, if the parents show strong parenting skills, you know, they are appropriate with discipline, they treat their child with respect, they don't go to a place of, getting physical with their kids, they, follow up with schoolwork and they have appropriate supervision over technology and there's some stability and routine and bedtimes and things like that, we see that these kids generally have a much higher chance of faring very well and coming out mentally stronger and resilient. So there's some opportunity, there's quite a bit of opportunity for parents to do right by their kid, even if they have minimal or no interaction with their ex-spouse. Where it gets difficult is if we have a situation where one parent really is abusive. And I don't mean yells at the kids a little bit too much, but really
No.
it is a toxic, unsafe
Yeah.
environment where there are safety issues. So in that situation, parallel parenting is not effective because you're basically sort of ignoring the danger signs. But if we're talking about where there's two generally functional people who can keep their kids safe, then there are times where parallel parenting is appropriate. Generally, that's what I'm doing with my
Okay.
ex-spouse. is, he has a lot of strengths as a parent. The kids are very safe with him. He's very consistent and reliable and stable, as am I. But we're not able to collaborate on a lot of things. And so we don't. And do I think it would be in everybody's best interest if we truly co-parented? 100%. But I don't have control over all of that. I only can control what I do.
Right. Well, at least you guys both have the mindset that the children are what's important. You both, make do for the children. I think that's, even if you can't, like you said, collaborate, at least you have the well-being of the children at the forefront of the agenda. So
Yeah, and I think a major barrier to co-parenting is if somebody keeps holding a lot of resentment or anger in the space where that divorce is. Like for me, I don't have the energy to look back and be pissed about anything. I mean, I truly like wish him well. Like I know that them having a happier, more successful, well-adjusted dad benefits my children. So that's all I want. I take no pleasure if there is hardships and things like that. I have no interest in creating any kind of barrier. And he might, if he were to be listening to this, think she's not saying anything accurately. Who knows? But I think if you're a parent who's sitting there, looking at what your ex-spouse is doing with their money, or feeling resentful that they went on a vacation, or wondering what she spent child support on, or rehashing mentally an argument that you once had with his mother. Like if you're in that space, you're not going to be able to co-parent effectively. Like you got to do the work, whether you work with a therapist or do some, serious self-reflection to be out of that space. Because if you can't be in a space where you wish good health for your ex, how are you going to have a civil conversation?
it's hard because when you allow someone to take up that much space in your head, it's hard to fit. Like the bandwidth is substantially decreased if you are focusing so much energy on like what your ex is doing. Like one of the things you just said, what are they spending the child support on? First of all,
None of your business.
thank you.
None of your business.
Doggone it. If I am putting my money towards the household that your child is living in, guess what? If that was just to get some ding dongs and ho hos, your child ate ding dongs and ho hos. It was part of the child support. Keep it pushing. So I guess my question to you is, what do you do as a therapist when you are when your client is the one with the resentment issues? Like how do you maneuver in a situation like that?
Well, honestly, my goal is, even if I recognize that that's the space they're in like session one, they really need to have a relationship with me where they trust my opinion, where they value my opinion or perspective, where
Okay.
they understand that, I'm not coming from a place of judgment or criticism. It's really stemming from a desire for them to be healthy and, feel invested and engaged in their present life and not be stuck in the past. So some of it is making sure that I have a close enough connection with a client where I can gently point out like, hey, I feel like you're in this space. Let's talk about it, because I think it's holding you back. And I think it's creating a barrier to you, whatever it is, moving on, being at peace. Sometimes it can really impact their relationship with their child, because kids get super worn out when one parent is really negative about the other parent. Like they recognize when a parent can't move on and is living in a place of resentment. And so there's times when these teenagers are like, I can't even be around you. Like, I can't handle looking at, your sad face when we're on year 7 or year 10 or whatever it is, or you're making snide comments about my stepmother who you've never spoken to.
Wow.
Or whatever. And so sometimes that's a real catalyst for parents who are in that space, as they see how it impacts their relationship with their kid or with a new partner. There's times where I see that second marriages are completely built on the connection that those people feel because they both hate their ex. And there's a point when they get married and they start living in the same house, maybe they have another child, or maybe they're just trying to do married things. And they start to recognize that what they based their initial attraction and connection on was the fact that we both hate our exes. And there's not a lot beyond that. So, in order for their relationship to be maintained, they have to continue the hatred. Because if we take that away,
What do you have?
what do we have? We have a 4-year-old, a beach house, and nothing else in common except how much we hate our exes, or how, and it might even not even be she hates her ex and he hates his ex. It might even be they both hate his ex.
Oh,
You know,
wow. Yeah. But the common connector is that
that drama.
hatred. Yeah. Like, who has time as an
There
adult
is, it's
woman?
surprising how many people have time.
It
I,
blows my mind. Like I
it
have
does.
a million things going on. Like
Mm-hmm.
and I think in my head, maybe because I always feel like I don't do enough, like lesser than the average like adult. I think I might have on my plate, but it's still so much. Like who has time? Like I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have.
Yeah. I always say, like, I'm not equipped. I'm not equipped to be in that
Yes,
space.
I'm not.
And for every minute you're sitting there thinking resentfully about your ex, you're not forming a relationship with someone else, or connecting with your kids, or getting some exercise, or taking a nap, or watching your favorite Netflix show, or drinking a glass of wine. Like, you know,
Sucking
there's a
all the
lot of
life.
time. It does. It literally, that's such a great description, is it sucks your future away from you.
Yeah.
And
Nobody's
so,
having it.
but I see that sometimes where, parents have parted ways, and maybe they're in a new relationship, and they want to come in and they want me to join the team of who hates their ex. And I'm just like, no, that's not my role.
That's not
Like,
why I'm here.
yeah. And so they don't necessarily recognize, and that's where I can, be helpful. And I think that a lot of people would really benefit from having a third party, whether it's a therapist, or like, there's people who have like mediation, they're mediators and they have credentials for that. There's some families I work with where maybe for 6 months they meet with me once a month, and they have a list of stuff they need to talk about. We need to figure out where the kids are going to go for summer camp. We need to decide where our son's going to go to high school. We need to decide how are we dividing up the finances for this, study abroad, whatever it is. And we sit down, and in that hour, an hour and a half, we set aside, we tick off each thing. And then when they get off the call with me, their list is done, and they don't have to spend a lot of energy sending emails back and forth, wondering how their ex is going to respond, getting caught up in the wording or their tone. We just get stuff done. And with some of the families, a lot of the families, when they're local, I go and I get to know the kids. I observe them at school, I observe them at home, chat with them, see what their developmental level is, their little personalities. Is this an anxious little one? Is this a kid who's super active and, breaks every rule in kindergarten class? Like, and so that if I make a recommendation, that parents recognize, like, I know their kid, I'm familiar with them. I'm not going to give like general platitudes or recommendations that may not apply or be relevant to their kid. So a lot of times parents can feel more invested in the process of collaborating with me as a third party, because not only are they going to have that mediator to keep it civil and keep us focused, but they also are going to be working with somebody who knows their kids.
Mm,
So if their kid has ADHD, or they have a learning issue, or they have a really strong personality, or whatever it is, they know I know.
yeah.
And so when when I give recommendations, it's based on their kid and what their kid, needs. And my job is to be responsive. So for some families, like, it is an investment, like, insurance doesn't cover me. I'm not on insurance panels. I'm up in your business. I might be looking at your divorce agreement, or we might have a session where the parent gives me a bunch of background information or whatever.
Mhm.
But the goal is for us to be collaborating and moving forward. So I don't know, it's super rewarding for me. It seems to be super helpful for the families I work with, and it can really get them out of that stuck in the mud, treading water
And
feeling.
that right there, treading water, it's got to be so tiring. I
Mhm.
can only imagine the exhales that you get to participate in, the relief, the lifting of burdens, the rest. And like you get to, and I ask this question with like people that I encounter, like, do you ever consider the impact that you're having upon like not only your clients but their children? You have the potential to impact like generations because of good decisions that are being made, changes and modifications in behavior, like for the better. You know what I'm saying? Do you ever sit
Yeah.
back and think about, ooh, like I
Well,
got to help
I
with
mean,
that?
you have to when, you get a string of texts where somebody parent is making threats towards another parent and the parent feels despairing, or, when you have to be talking to a lawyer, for at a meeting 2 hours on a Thursday, whatever it is, like I couldn't do this if I didn't see that it's beneficial, one, and two, see that it like is life changing for a lot of families, and like not everybody's going to change. Like your ex might stay the same jerk they always were, but how you deal with it and what you're role modeling for your kid or what you do to set the stage for a future relationship, that's life changing. So if somebody comes to me and they're like, I just want you to make my ex different or better, I can't guarantee that. But I
Right.
absolutely can help parents figure out better patterns for themselves, better communication, how to be more connected to their kid and equip their kid with the tools that they need to get through this. So I don't know. I dig it. I mean, I work with all different kids. This just happens to be a real area of mine that as the years go by, I get more and more focused on. And some of it is in the beginning years of my own divorce. I don't think it would have been appropriate for me to get too enmeshed in, cases that were high conflict because I was living it. But, I mean, we're still living through raising kids, with a co-parent we're divorced from, but we're not in the trenches like we were.
Right.
I have the benefit of stepping back and seeing like what the big long game is, how things turn out. I now have years of experience in seeing that kids I worked with 8, 9 years ago, now they're 22, now they're 15, now they're 30, and I get to see like what do these outcomes look like now that I've been so long in this field. So I get to build on that all the time. I had a client call me recently and I had worked with them a long time ago, like probably 9 years ago. And so she called and she's like, oh, I remember you, like you really helped us. And I was like, oh, I'm so much better now. Like I have 9 more years of experience since I
Yeah.
saw you last. Like you're getting like Tara 2.0.
Oh,
And,
yes.
it's like every year you grow as a clinician and more research comes out. And so, that was really exciting for me to be like, gosh, to see the influence I had on this family 9 years ago, and then to be able to come in and really support them again. Like that's super satisfying.
Awesome. I bet. I can only imagine. So one of the things you mentioned, you had the experience. You should like Terra 2.0. I'm so much better now. Two books, Better Behavior for Ages 2 through 10, and that was released in 2013.
2013.
And then Adolescence, A Parent's Guide, and that was released just last year, 2020. So I would like to ask the premise for both of them. However, our time is running a little short.
I
So I
know.
want that Adolescence, A Parent's Guide. That sounds like it's got some sustenance because adolescence is a tricky age.
Mm-hmm.
And there you hear people say all the time, there is no handbook, there is no manual. But it sounds like you might have put together a little something, something.
I try to, yeah. So that first book, Better Behavior for Ages 2 to 10, really stands the test of time. It is a fantastic book for the building blocks of how to create a nurturing but like focused relationship with your kid. It talks about how to elicit listening skills, how to have nurturing communication, what makes sense as far as consequences, how do we reinforce behavior in our child. And then the teenage book, Parents, or Adolescence Parents Guide, is the book is constructed where, each chapter is kind of a separate age group looking at, pre-adolescence, early adolescence, and moving on through all the way into young adulthood, and talking about some main issues or some commonalities within that age group, whether it be social pressures, the kids who have really big emotions, managing technology and social media, and it's kind of topical. And so we talk about really concrete suggestions from how to talk to your kid about something. Like there's actual scenarios in there. Like, here's things you can say that might be helpful. Here's some things that might not be helpful and you might want to avoid. And so that's a different book. It's definitely a different book. But I actually also want to tell you about my third book, which is being released on August 13th.
Oh,
And yes. So this one is actually for first-time toddler moms. So I think of it as almost like a prequel to
the
Better
other
Behavior.
two.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a great resource for when you've got that kid who's transitioning from kind of that infancy into, the terrible twos and all of that. And you're getting, the no's and the power struggles and the foot stomping and, how to set up rules and boundaries for your kid, how to make sure that you're setting the stage for success, how to take care of yourself as the mother of a rambunctious toddler. So that book is called, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed that I can't. It's called it's the first time. What is it called? First Time Toddler Moms Discipline Handbook. Oh my gosh. Look it up on Amazon. Go to Tara Egan and you'll see it. I never remember the titles. The only reason I remembered Better Behavior is because it's sitting right in front of me. Yeah, it's First Time Moms Toddler Discipline Handbook.
Wow.
And so that's coming out, and I would love for folks, and if you want, I can give you a couple copies for a giveaway for your audience, and
Yes.
we can mail them a hardcover copy. And if I would love to hear the review, if they want to leave a review on Amazon, it would be very much appreciated. So
y'all hear that? Ooh, Dr. Tara wants to bless some people. Y'all hear that? I would love it. Oh my gosh. I love how you explained it. You described it as the prequel. So it sounds like you got like a little section for each and every one. So then a couple questions. One, did baby girl meaning Anna, assist you or either directly or indirectly with the writing of Adolescence, a Parent's Guide?
The kids, when I wrote the first book, I had kids ages 2 to 10. When I wrote the second book, I had teenagers.
Exactly.
And so, and I know the prequel of, which is done by a different publisher, it's not meant to be a prequel, but it definitely, those books kind of blend nicely into each other. Like that, it just ended up being a topic that the publisher approached me about. And it was like, I could have written it in my sleep because I just do so much with, the kids of all these ages. But you'll see in every single one of these books, there's anecdotes that are directly pulled from my parenting life.
Wow.
And so, really, really relatable. I mean, not one single one is contrived. They're all real life stories. And I want parents to understand, like, yeah, sure, I have a doctorate and, parenting expert, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, like, I'm also just a mom who's trying to do the best I can.
Relatable. We are not so different. Hello.
Exactly. Like if you have not cried in your car because your kid just had a tantrum in the grocery store, like, are you really a parent? Maybe not. So, so we've got to all be connected, and we can learn so much from each other as mothers and parents. But I'm lucky enough where I get to see all these kids in my work, and I get to read all the research and try to put it together in a way that is meaningful to parents and feels readable and like something they can implement like today. Oh,
that sounds amazing. So what's next? You got to do one for the older, the ones that's transitioning into adulthood. Like
I feel like that is going to be coming, as well as really a book that is more tailored to the parents who are going through a divorce or separation. Like I'm not really sure what my next project's going to be, but those are two areas, that are probably inevitable as far as me writing books.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. And when you do, find we are not so different because we're gonna get together and we're gonna talk about it. I need all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before we get out of here, I want you to tell my listeners and or viewers where can they find you. I want you to shamelessly plug
Okay.
yourself,
I'm going
girl.
to promote.
Give us
Okay.
titles, give us social media handles, give us all the goods.
Okay. So once again, I'm Dr. Tara Egan, Egan, and you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. Those are the two primary. I'm also on Pinterest. My podcast comes out every week, and that's called One Day You'll Thank Me, and you can find it on any of your favorite podcast platform. I also have a YouTube channel that's just at Dr. Tara Egan, and so I offer some videos about all sorts of topics, ADHD, spanking, anxiety, early puberty. I mean, all sorts of topics. And of course, stuff about divorce and separation. If you go to my website, which is www.drtaraegan.com, you'll find there's a mix of free resources like things that you can download, accessing the podcast and the YouTube channel. But there's also some things as far as how to hook up with me as far as parent coaching. If you're local to the Charlotte, North Carolina, or just North Carolina area, if you want to work with me in like the therapist capacity, I do have some online courses to support parents both in managing their kids with technology and social media, which is kind of another passion of mine, as well as some new resources for parents who are going through separation and divorce. For me, I'm just not that therapist who sits in the chair from 9 to 5 and sees one client after the other. I work with a lot of different families. I work with schools. I do the podcasting. I write books. I do public speaking. I want to do it all. And it's important to me that not only do I get to work with individual families who really need that one-on-one support, but that I also, give away the field of child and adolescent therapy so everybody can take a little piece home with them.
Yeah.
You mentioned trade secrets. Like, I don't really have those. Like, I'm here to educate as many people as possible, to have people feel supported, to have people have resources at their fingertips that they feel is from a trustworthy, knowledgeable source. Like, I want to be that resource for families. So, usually, most of it you can find if you go to drtaraegan.com. That's a great place to start, and you can tag into the different things I have going on. But also, I do try to update Facebook regularly and talk about, if there's a public speaking event or if there's a Facebook Live. I have a private Facebook group that I have to say I'm not as active in as I'd like, and that's called Adolescence, a Parent's Guide. And it's a resource for parents who have a high schooler, like a middle schooler moving into high school, or a high schooler, to talk about any challenges or to be able to propose a question to the group at large. It's a very supportive place. So if you're into Facebook groups, that could also be a resource. So parents shouldn't be shy. They should ask for help when they need it. They should always be open to information. And don't be afraid to reach out to a professional. Like, we're here to help. Like, we're not here to judge you. We're not trying to make life feel harder. We're trying to make everything feel easier.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, don't suffer in silence. Ask for help. Never be ashamed to ask for help, because we're all going to need. That's something that's inevitable. Everyone's going to need it at one point in their life, or across the span of their lives. We'll put it like that. So
yeah, we all need support. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for spending your morning with We Are Not So Different. I did have the opportunity to take some notes. Y'all couldn't see me, right?
Nice.
But but I was taking notes because I'm like, okay,
me too.
Awesome. So I hope, pray that this is helpful to somebody that's either watching and or listening. And if you want to holler at Dr. Egan, I'm sure she won't mind if you slide in her DMs on Facebook.
Absolutely.
Or reach out to her via YouTube or whatever other place that she mentioned. And when I post these to my YouTube page or wherever, I'll make sure to tag her on Facebook so that way you won't have to look for her. I'll find her for you.
Yeah. Well, in my Instagram page, because that is where we do post a lot about the podcast, is called Dr. Egan and Anna, because she's my sidekick for the podcast. Yeah. So she posts on there occasionally,
I
and
love that.
yeah, we try to have a mix of stuff about the podcast, as well as, we have a lot of like pictures of our cute pets on there. So,
Oh, I
but
love
that's
that.
Dr. Egan and Anna. So that is a little bit of a different handle. Whereas on Facebook, that's all me. She's Anna's not on that. But yeah, I would appreciate anybody letting, out there who has a question, reach out, because I'm happy to answer it.
I love it. Well, like I said, thank you so much for spending your time with Me Are Not So Different, Doctor. We truly appreciate it and got lots of nuggets, and I can't wait to get the feedback from this one.
Great.
As for you guys, you know the drill. Until next week, do something nice for yourself, and go ahead, shoot me a little note, or maybe take a little picture telling me what it was that you did for yourself, because you deserve it. Until next week, guys. Peace.
We are not so different.